I've clicked onto the global tropical overview for June the 30th, 2024. As is always the case in these videos, the forecast pressure are just mine, and in making any decisions ahead of Hurricane Beryl, look toward your local weather office, local emergency management, and the National Hurricane Center for the best information local to you. So today is a pretty remarkable day in the Atlantic. We have Hurricane Beryl continuing to rapidly intensify. Now a Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, the first one ever recorded in June, and the first major hurricane in June in about 58 years, since 1966 when we had Hurricane Alma become a Category 3 then. It's also the first Atlantic major hurricane to form east of the Lesser Antilles in June. And this system, it's appearing to continue to strengthen, as this is now a powerful Category 4 hurricane. As confirmed by recon data, you can see this is the latest Air Force plane. They're going to go in for another pass, but that will happen after this video comes out. This plane went right through the southwestern to the northeastern eye wall a little bit ago and found winds of Category 4 force in the northeastern eye wall. And those winds were about 130 to 140 miles per hour. And the central pressure, we don't have a final value just yet, but we had an estimated pressure value of about 960 or 961 millibars, a fairly significant drop from earlier, indicating that this system is still quickly to rapidly intensifying. And you can see it here. One thing that you look for now at this top end of the scale is for the storm to symmetricize, if that makes sense, if that's a word even, basically become more symmetric in its clouds. So you can see that over the morning hours, we've had this circle of thunderstorms around the eye become more symmetric around the eye. And this is a key thing to watch for when you're getting into Category 4 and up to Category 5. Now, importantly, now that we are up to Category 4, the intensity from now on really ceases to matter all too much. Now at the threshold of Category 4, damage is likely going to be very extensive, if not catastrophic, wherever those strongest winds go. Now, we know the strongest winds right now are in the northeastern eye wall at least. Could they be in the northwestern eye wall? Possibly. Now, the unfortunate thing is that this system's going to run right into the Windward Island chain, and specifically for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada, this is an extremely serious situation now for those islands especially. Barbados and St. Vincent, still a serious situation, absolutely, but the center track right now is right through the more southerly islands in the Windward Island chain. And you can see here, hurricane warning in place for good reason, as we are expecting the core of a Category 4 hurricane to come right through the Windward Island chain. Now, for preparations, you still have time today to rush preparations to completion if they are not done. The tropical storm force winds are forecast to arrive sometime tonight or tomorrow morning. The earliest reasonable time you can expect them is tonight around 8 p.m. on this graphic. So you need to have your preparations done within, say, the next 8 hours. I'm recording this at noon, so you have about 7 to 8 hours by the time this video comes out to get your preparations done. And once that happens, you need to hunker down and get ready to ride out this hurricane. And if you're in any areas that could be under evacuation order, I've not seen any evacuation orders. I'm not sure how they do it in these island nations. But if you are under any evacuation orders, especially in the center track of the storm, maybe on a smaller island in, say, the Grenadines, you need to heed that evacuation order, as we're expecting a very significant storm surge with this system. We could have storm surge, 7+ feet above normally dry ground in these islands, and storm surge is nothing to mess around with. It is the #1 cause of fatalities in hurricanes, and you never want to just underestimate the power of storm surge, especially in these major hurricanes. Now, in terms of hurricane force winds, Barbados, you're looking good right now. Now, we'll watch for short-term northern wobbles in the track. A northern wobble could bring the hurricane force wind field easily to Barbados. So don't take this map showing you only a 5% chance verbatim. You could absolutely still get hurricane force winds here. And this, I don't know if this is accounting for wind gusts of hurricane force as well. Now, you see that corridor of orange and red coming into the Windward Islands, so St. Vincent, the Grenadines, Grenada. That's 60 to 70% chance of hurricane force winds, and that looks to be the core area for hurricane impacts as the system comes through. Now, in terms of rainfall, this is another potential issue of water. Now, the good news is the storm is not stalling here. It's moving at a fairly brisk pace, so we're not going to be getting 20, 30 inches of rainfall from the system. But you could still get a lot of heavy rainfall in a short period of time, especially here in St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Barbados, the Grenadines, and Grenada. We could have local totals of 6 to 10 inches of rain. That's 150 to say maybe 250 millimeters of rainfall in a short period of time, and that could easily lead to significant flooding issues along these islands, especially because we do have higher terrain in some of these island nations. And you can also see that the rainfall extends pretty far north away from the storm. Martinique, Dominica, Guadeloupe, you could have some rainfall as well. Some of that could be significant and could cause some local flooding issues. So again, for the Windward Islands, preparations need to be rushed to completion this afternoon. There is no exception. Once these tropical storm force winds arrive, you should be inside, as shortly after these tropical storm force winds, because remember, Beryl is a very small storm. Shortly after these arrive, the hurricane force winds are going to arrive, and you really do not want to be outside when you have tropical storm and hurricane force winds coming through. Hunker down, stay inside until it's told that it's all clear after the storm has passed. Now, of course, this is only one part of the forecast. We have an entire 5-day forecast to deal with the storm, and we're going to be dealing with this system for a long time. Now, one thing is that depending on how strong the storm gets, this dictates how strong it is in the Caribbean to an extent. Now, one thing that is common for these smaller systems is once they get to these high intensities, they usually go into an eyewall replacement cycle not too long after. That being a cycle where you get a ring of thunderstorms developing outside of the main eyewall. Those end up choking off the inner eyewall, if you will. And through that process, it contracts, and that outer ring of thunderstorms becomes the new eyewall around the eye. And the net effect of that is a storm weakens, but it gets larger. And if the environment is favorable, which it may still have an opportunity to do so in the Eastern Caribbean if it does it fast enough, it could re-intensify right back up to the intensity that it was prior to the eyewall replacement cycle. Now, I'd say if an eyewall replacement cycle were to occur, that could potentially be good news for the Greater Antilles, specifically talking about Haiti and Jamaica here, because we could see a scenario where the storm begins to weaken through the replacement cycle, then maybe gets disrupted heavily by the strong trade winds in the Eastern Caribbean. But at this time, that's no guarantee. Eyewall replacement cycles are extremely hard to predict. They're very just hard to pick out and forecast. They're really a real-time watch type of thing. And it's possible that this doesn't happen. It's possible that this storm just does not go through one of those cycles. And also there are versions of the cycles which can be where the storm maintains intensity or even intensifies slightly. We've seen that before, and it's hard to say exactly what could entirely happen if one of those cycles occurs. The main thing today for the Greater Antilles, so Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and Jamaica, is that we are likely to have a major hurricane coming through the Eastern and Central Caribbean as we get into the mid-week time frame. Now, good news for Hispaniola. The storm is not likely right now to come all too far north, and we're not likely to see a significant impact, like a direct hit, but what I mean by that, for those islands. But you could still get enhanced rainfall from this. And you can see this in the rainfall forecast from the National Hurricane Center, where we have this area. It is of lower confidence, but as the system tracks to the south, you still have trailing rain bands. And with the high topography here, that could easily lead to a lot of flooding issues in short fashion in Hispaniola. Now for Jamaica, the threat is greater for you to get a direct hit at this point. The models are in general agreement that once the system gets into the Central Caribbean, it's going to start turning back towards the west. You can see why that happens here in the 500 millibar height map. So this is showing you an area of high pressure here draped over the eastern United States and southern United States. And we have a part of this ridge that's not all too visible, but it's over the central Atlantic. This is what's helping steer the storm alongside the trade winds towards the west. As the storm comes into the eastern Caribbean, we will have a little bit of a break in the ridging. So this part of the ridge is here, this part of the ridge is here. We have a trough in between, so we have a little bit of a break. This is going to try and pull the storm towards the north. Now, this break is not going to last long enough, and it's not strong enough at all to pull the system north and have it fully recurve in a scenario where it would come right through Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos, and then eventually do Bermuda. Reason being, this trough is moving very fast off towards the east, and you'll see that as we go in time, this trough quickly departs, now moving east of Bermuda on this loop. And now, as that trough departs, we now get this steering ridge building back in towards the east. And now you have a ridge generally placed like this. And this is now going to start to steer the system back due west because we have such a strong area of high pressure over the southern United States. Now, the key thing for Jamaica especially is how far north does it get before it makes this westward turn? That's the key. If it stays pretty far south in this turn and then bends west, you could get into a scenario where you actually avoid the hurricane force winds, and maybe get tropical storm force winds, but you avoid a direct hit from the system. On the other hand, like the GFS is showing here, if the storm gets far enough north before making that westward turn, then you have a scenario where you could get a direct hit upon the island. And there is a possibility here that this is still a major Category 3 hurricane by the time it gets to Jamaica. This is shown by the National Hurricane Center forecast. Major here. See that M on the cone? That's Category 3 intensity on this forecast. So for areas in the Greater Antilles, I'll say for Hispaniola, Cuba, and Jamaica, but especially areas, say Haiti and Jamaica, make sure you're staying very closely tuned to this storm. Make sure you're watching the National Hurricane Center advisories. They're going to be issuing these every 3 hours. A new cone comes out every 6 hours. And now that we're in this time frame of 3 days roughly, but before the storm gets to these areas, what you need to be doing right now is you need to be reviewing your hurricane preparedness kit and your plan. Review that it's ready so that when a watch and warning gets issued, because it will probably within the next day, so that you're ready for that, and then you can put that plan into action. So that's important to remember. And I'll have more videos, of course, talking about this throughout the rest of the week. I'm not going to leave you all in the dark. I'm going to keep videos going, hopefully on a daily basis here as the system progresses west. Now, we have even more to talk about afterwards, after it passes Jamaica. You can see the Hurricane Center forecast has this coming into the Western Caribbean and into Mexico as a hurricane. Now, the unfortunate side effect of the storm remaining stronger in Central Caribbean is that it will likely be stronger once it gets into the Western Caribbean. Now, the main thing holding it back in the Central Caribbean is very strong easterly trade winds relative, or well, not relative to anything. It's climatology. Trade winds are very strong usually this time of year. Now, what's going to happen is the upper high that's draped over the system right now, and I don't really have a map to show this, but it's going to get more disaligned to that flow at the surface. So you're going to have it to where you have very strong trade wind flow at the surface, but if you go up into the top of the troposphere, so say you have a graph like this, you have very strong trade winds here at the surface, but the winds aloft are very weak. So you end up with the system that could easily tilt like this with height. That's going to be its main struggle in the Central Caribbean, but unfortunately models are not showing much significant weakening. This could be more of a gradual weakening trend as it does so. We did talk about yesterday how there was an upper trough forecast to be over here, but models are in continuous agreement, and it does make sense given that the storm is very strong right now, that this ridge aloft of the system is going to be much stronger and more able to fight off this trough here. And as you can see on the GFS, it's able to completely nudge it out of the way, which takes away some of the westerly flow aloft, which would have been more of an aspect of ripping the system completely apart. As an effect of this, the system gradually weakening will reach the Caribbean in all likelihood as a hurricane. Now, one thing about climatology as well with the trade winds. Usually, once you get into the Western Caribbean, the trade winds weaken down. And that is what's forecast here by the models. And we'll still have that upper high over the system. As you can see on this GFS run, we still have an upper high over here. As the trade winds slow and it's underneath this upper high, the environment may be favorable again for the system to re-intensify on approach to Mexico. Now, we're not talking about rapid intensification like this. It will likely have to readjust itself after being sheared for the past couple of days, but we could still be looking at a hurricane here. And I believe the National Hurricane Center now has this coming in as a Category 2 hurricane into Mexico. So if you're in Belize, Mexico, even in Central America like Honduras and Nicaragua, you need to be still paying very close attention to the storm and to the National Hurricane Center advisories as the system comes west. This is still a fairly uncertain forecast right now, but what we can tell you track-wise is that it's likely to be within the vicinity of the Western Caribbean by the latter half of the week, just given the strong area of high pressure that we're going to have over the United States. Now, there might be some questions of afterwards. What could happen in the Gulf of Mexico if it gets there? There is potential that the system just buries itself into Central America, but what if it doesn't? What happens if we get the system to track into the Gulf of Mexico? It is way too early to know exactly what's going to happen. However, if the system does make it into the Gulf of Mexico, models are showing that we could have more troughiness digging into the central United States by this time. This would be, as an effect, pushing the ridge that was steering it further west off towards the east, and the net effect of this would be to bring it north somewhere. Exactly how strong is this trough and how resilient is the ridge is a big question. If the ridge is a bit stronger, you could get a scenario where the storm stays still fairly far south and comes into northeastern Mexico. On the other hand, say the ridge is weaker, you could get a scenario where the storm comes up perhaps even into the central Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And I'm highlighting this because this is just some of the uncertainty that we have. This is a very large range of potential uncertainty tracks that we have, and this is past 5 days. This is even in some cases getting past a 7-day forecast. Very uncertain. So it's impossible for someone to tell you exactly what's going to happen with the storm as we get into, next week, potentially. This is after the 4th of July holiday. Now, what I can tell you for central and northeastern Mexico and the Gulf Coast, specifically from the Florida Panhandle west, I'd say right now, what you need to be doing is just keeping an eye on Beryl as it comes to the Caribbean. Nothing imminent right now, nothing to panic over, but it's worth watching. And if we get, to a scenario where we're back here in the Western Caribbean and we are having this discussion in a few days and we're now talking about a storm more likely to come up into the Gulf of Mexico, at that point we can talk about, getting your preparedness kit ready, getting everything out to be prepared for the storm. But as of right now, it's nothing of imminent concern, nothing to panic over, and we'll just continue to watch it as it progresses. And we'll see exactly how the environment pans out as well for the system once it does get into the Gulf of Mexico. That's all that I've got for Beryl. I'm going to quickly talk about the rest of the Atlantic as we do have other systems active. We have Invest 94L in the Bay of Campeche. This is a broad low that has developed over the past day, and it might just barely become a tropical depression or a tropical storm before moving into Mexico later today. And it gives that about 50% odds, by the way, of development. We also have a tropical wave behind Beryl. This is likely to develop as it comes northwest, and we could be looking at further impacts to the Lesser Antilles after Beryl passes through, but exact specifics on this are a little more unknown right now and will remain that way really until the system forms, so we're really not going to be talking about that one all too much right now. But you can see the National Hurricane Center outlook, again, 50% on 94L right now, and 70% chance of development on 96L, this one is, with that tropical wave behind it, moving towards the Lesser Antilles. That's all that I've got for today. I will try to get a video out before the system moves through the Lesser Antilles tomorrow morning. If not, I'll have one up sometime tomorrow. But stay safe in the Windward Islands. And again, just saying at the end here, have your preparations done by today. Rush them to completion and hunker down as we have a Category 4 hurricane on the way. But stay safe. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.